Welcome to another episode of Data Gurus. I'm so excited about this episode today. I have Steve Phillips, who is the chairman and chief innovation officer of Zappi, and also Ryan Barry, who is the president of Zappi. Welcome.
Thanks, Sima.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you. I mentioned it before. You guys are like rock stars in the industry. So I think people either have met you or know of you. And if they don't know of you now, they will, because you just published this amazing book, The Consumer Insights Revolution. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a surreal couple months. Labor of love, as Steve and I have been talking. We put 10 years into building Zappi, and that book's really a kind of an articulation of all the work we did to get here.
I want to dive into specific areas of the book, but I would love just to understand what inspired you to sit down and write a book about our industry.
Well, I think so. We've been going on this partnership with Pepsi very specifically for about 5-6 years now, maybe longer. And Stephan Gans, who is the head of consumer insights and strategy at Pepsi, had really pushed us, the industry, his team internally, to change the way consumer insights is run, managed, integrated within that business holistically. And the start of that was a big pitch that we very fortunately won, and about building a platform and trying to 10x the value of the data, making that data more accessible to the organization so that they can make smarter business decisions. And in the process, change the role of the insight manager from, order taker to strategic business partner. And we've been on this journey for, 5-6 years, and it's been really interesting. And there are a few other clients that we've been doing the same thing with.
Wow.
And Ryan, myself, and Stephan were sitting down and talking about it, saying this has been a fascinating journey to us from a technology build perspective, but more so Pepsi from a behavior change, a people and a process place. And we thought it would be really valuable and interesting to put down our lessons on paper. We do bring in some stories from our other clients, but really a lot of it is around the journey that Pepsi have been on, and seeing if we can help the industry step change to become more central, more important, and our data be more important and central to the organizations we serve.
I find it I attribute the success of Pepsi so much to obviously the platform and the value you guys bring to the table, but having that visionary at the client saying, this is what I envision consumer insights to be, and really championing that internally within the organization. Did you find that he had a lot of resistance? I know you guys all sat around and spent many hours together, but I'm curious, what was the feedback internally at Pepsi to embark on this journey?
Well, I think what makes Stephan unique is he's a marketing expert who was also a consultant, and his brief was very much to really elevate this investment.
Yeah.
And so I think at the time when he joined the company, he was reporting to the guy who's now the CEO of the business, Ramon, who's really a pragmatic, operations forward leader.
Right.
And so I remember calling you, Steve, because Pepsi's obviously down in Purchase, New York. I live in Metro West of Boston, so it's like a convenient 2-hour drive. And I remember the first time I met Stephan, I didn't know who he was, and he had this little piece of paper on his wall, and it was this vision of like democratizing learning, platforming day-to-day research, disintermediating value from thinking partners to technology partners. And I remember calling Steve, and I go, I just met somebody who has the exact same vision of us. And and not many people know this. Steve knows this because we have in his case, white hair, and in my case, gray hair to prove it. You were pivoting our company at that exact moment. So
it was validation.
It was it was also what made the pivot work. I mean, we were App Store, we were taking incumbent agencies' methods and selling them. And we kept hearing from our customers, like, we want tomorrow's thinking and we want our data to be smarter. And I just remember, and we had already made that decision, and it was like kind of scary. And Stephan was like, this is what I want to do. And I just remember calling Steve, like, someone is either as crazy or as on it as us. And as often happens, and Sima, you know this from like working with a lot of businesses, we then brought a lot of thinking to the table, which brands then use to create RFPs. It happens all the time. So I remember getting the
Of course.
RFP that we helped write, which was always, it's always enjoyable. But, I think the hardest part for Stephan was getting the initial sign off on this bold vision, but it was the work after that, right? Like businesses are naturally putting power where the P&Ls live, so that you want to sell more in Ecuador, you're putting power there. And so that's a federation of P&Ls, a federation of companies. And I think one of the things that a lot of people don't know about Stephan is he did that without hardline managerial oversight. Most of the functional leads across the business were dotted line reports at best to Stephan, but he united people on a common why and showed them a way forward. And I think that's why it worked.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and
And yeah, go-
yeah, I should say a big shout out to our fourth author, which is Kate Shard. And she was the person, so it was absolutely Stephan's vision that we helped empower, but it was her who helped implement. And we talk about what's difficult in that process. And yeah, sure, there was a lot of technology build that we needed to do to get things right, to enable it to happen. But that's just an enabler. And what has to happen is you need to bring the people along. You need to change the role that they're doing, sometimes change reporting, change structure, change the way they think about consumer insight, the way they execute on their business plans, utilizing consumer insight, the way they persuade their marketing colleagues to change the ways they do business. And Kate really spearheaded almost all of that behavior change process. And that to me is probably the hardest element of the whole thing. And the hardest slog. I mean, you've got it. It's a process of persuading people in every region, in every brand, in every country to say, come along this new journey with us. This new journey is exciting. Yes, it's a change, but it will enable you to be much more strategic, to play much bigger role within your organization. But in order to play that role, you have to change what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And that's hard with people. And Kate really pushed that. And there were a lot of lessons in the book from her about how best to invigorate that type of change in an organization.
Yeah, it's quite amazing because I think we're all human, and there's some people who adapt to change and they're excited and motivated by it, and there's others that are just, I don't know if this is actually going to work, and that's a really hard shift, especially in an organization that's so large.
Yeah.
Right? You can't have people sitting on the sidelines and saying, "We'll see. Well, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't." Before we go further, I just want to make sure we articulate, exactly what did Pepsi build? I love the name of the platform that they used for their kind of company-wide system. I think it's Ada. Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
Go ahead, Mark.
yeah. So I mean, what the reason that this is so intrinsically linked with us is they wanted to build new to the world thinking, put it all on one platform. We
Okay.
obviously were pivoting from being a panel business. And the thing that not many people know is that what Pepsi built was built alongside many other peers. So we formed this group of companies. We never talked about it publicly because Steve and I always wanted to be more like Fight Club. You ever see that movie, Fight Club? You don't, the
Yes.
rule of Fight
Yeah.
Club is you don't talk about.
Yes.
So this group, I'm still not going to say the name on this podcast, but this group was like Fight Club. And what we were doing was saying, what are the right ways to ask questions, to get information that are going to help A, inspire creativity and breakthrough thinking, and B, be predictive of business outcomes. And so Pepsi and several other businesses formed this coalition where we were putting our money, our time, and our brains together to question everything. Like, do we need facial coding or eye tracking or emojis? And which one's more predictive
Right.
relative to the cost benefits? And like, we did that for a while, right? And so the net outcome of that was what we built together was an innovation system and an advertising system. Ada then morphed further, right? So Ada plugs into the Lucy interface, which is an OpenAI powered knowledge management platform, the Waxy interface, which is a real-time volumetric forecasting system, CreativeX, and a few other, Black Swan and a few other businesses, so that they had one ecosystem. And what I love about that is there is really no such thing as one platform that can do everything, but how can all the platforms together compound the data benefit that a business like Pepsi has? And that's obviously where a lot of the future is then enabled with language models and all the work that's happening with AI.
Fascinating. Let me ask you this. I know in the old days, you would bring in a report and say, here are the results of this study, right? And everybody, and you would do the same thing that we just talked about, evangelize the results. Like, I think I presented a segmentation on IBM 100 times to get everybody on board and saying, here are the segments till I was blown in the face. And then you have another study that comes in and the results are totally different,
Mm.
right? So when you think about these systems and platforms communicating, how are they rationalizing differences in the data? Is there some kind of back end work that's happening to kind of help people understand the nuances?
But each data stream is doing something different.
Right.
And typically, I don't think the results contradict. They often, but they can often complement.
Yes.
So they may say different things, but they're probably coming at the problem in a different way. So if you're trying to understand a target audience, then sure, the work we're doing is going to really help you. But the work Black Swan are doing, particularly at the cutting edge of where the consumer is in terms of social media, that's going to
Right.
give you a different result. But it's not because it's different, contradicting. It's because it's complementing. So
Right.
one is at the forefront of where the latest trends are going. One is the mainstream. And of course, you need to understand both of those things.
Right.
And the great thing about the ADA platform and the way Pepsi go about it is that you can have those two pieces of information simultaneously in the same room when you're trying to make a decision. And the worst outcome is one person over here owns this piece of information. One person over here owns this piece of information. And they're arguing about whose information is better.
Right.
And it's not. It's not
Right.
about whose is better. It's about utilizing them together and having that democratized platform that enables you to look at all of this data in the round.
So thank you. That's very helpful. I'm curious from your perspective, what is the fundamental, by the way, I love this chart on page 63. It's the connected insights framework in terms of how you look at people, process, platform, data, and the consumer focus. The part that, obviously the technology enables you to do a lot of the process and the platform. To me, the most critical change is the people.
And
And if you had to offer advice to people in either consumer insights organizations or in vendors that are providing insights, what have you seen as common threads where people actually have become successful in that transformation?
well, I think like the getting systems of record helps take away that you'll know this from like those segmentation days. It takes away the
Right.
dozens of hours of week of there's a question, which one of 20 vendors that we call are we calling to answer it?
Right.
And then the learning curve of now I got to teach Sima how to speak my language and my boss's language, but Steve knew, but I don't want to use Steve for this project and Ryan's too expensive or whatever the thing is, right?
Right.
So I think by getting like by getting a baseline stack, I mean, Steve, we've talked about this a lot. Like it's very similar with insights. It's just Steve rightfully called out someone like Kate, who's amazing at architecting her system and enabling her staff around the world to get the answers they need. So that's kind of one part. I
Sure.
think the other is like, how are we actually working with agencies in marketing? Do they really like these big, laborious PowerPoints that are colored in a certain way that we fiddle all weekend in? Or would they rather say 4 days, meet with you, go through a dashboard and have a discussion about what to do
Right.
next? And like, I remember there's a guy who used to be at Clorox. He's now just recently joined Campbell's. His name's Ben Jordan. If you ever met him, you know him. He's an incredibly unique man. But Ben used to, this is going back like 10 years ago. He would go to the
Right.
CEO's office with Zappi on his smartphone and be like, here's why this concept isn't good, but here's 2 things we can do. And so there's a degree of comfort in stop trying to defend the number, trust the number, and talk about what the
Right.
number means for your business that I think a lot of businesses or a lot of people in insights roles need to do. And that's where I do have a bugbear, which is we're not spending nearly enough time on the L&D side of this industry. We're not spending enough time upskilling people. And to your point, Sima, like a lot of folks don't like change. And their job 10
Right.
years ago was to be a procurement manager, put a little bit of lipstick on the bases report and let it move. And like, it's not the job anymore, So there's like a from two
Yeah.
there.
Do you think that how we recruit for consumer insights will be very different in the future? My sense is that we're going to need people with more business acumen
Yep.
who can interpret data and connect it to actually what's going on in the business, almost like an internal consulting agency. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
I think that's right. I get so the way I've been talking about the consumer insight industry and what I think our job will be 2 years from now. So I think that on the very good side, our data is becoming more and more powerful and more integral into the way businesses make decisions. Because if we can make that data rich and powerful and at the available to the user when they're making the decision, then we've done our job really. That means I think that we have to think of ourselves a lot less as project managers and a lot more as data asset managers.
Mhm.
So one of the things we're really good at as an industry is we're good with data. There are a lot of other data streams that where the people aren't very good with data. They just know their set of data. They don't know how it works in the real world. They don't know how it integrates with other forms. Whereas we've always, right from the beginning, been good at thinking, we did 4 focus groups and then 100 interviews, and I could put those 2 things together in the same report. And that's actually a real skill that we have. So we, I think, as an industry, have a real opportunity to be at the forefront of managing the company's data asset, particularly the richness that comes from consumer insight. And if we think of ourselves as managing that data, integrating with other data streams, thinking about the value that it can create, and then using AI to create that value, then we become really central to our organizations. We help make them much more consumer centric, which is what most of the companies that we talk to want to be. And so I think that management and thinking and creating value from data is the core of what we need to do, but it's also at the core of what a lot of us are good at.
Well, and
Yeah.
think about like the
So
people side, right? Like, I don't know that it's like a uniform answer to your first question. Like, so I'm involved with some of the industry education bodies, and if you're Michigan State or Wisconsin or Georgia, how do you infuse other career tracks to people who have decided, I want to learn technical market research? Like, I'll give you an example. Not one of the programs I just mentioned has a customer success track. Yet
okay.
most of the people who graduate, when they call vendors, most of the jobs are coming from the software side of the industry. And the best place to go if you're new is customer success because you can learn things. So that's like one side of it. Like, how do we cross-pollinate industry technical skill sets with other skill sets? And how do we bring bit more business acumen to experts, advertising research experts or tracking research experts or what have you? But I'm starting to see a shift where those very technical roles, Kate and Stephan are a
Mhm.
great example. Stephan is a marketing guy. Kate is a technical research expert. Together, they were a superpower. But then you contrast that further. If you're in a region and you're trying to sell more blow pops, I have all my kids' Halloween candy, by the way. You're trying to sell more blow pops. How do you leverage an expert capability that really knows the intricacies of how to make copy better as a partner?
Right.
But if I'm in that region and I'm staffing a team, how do I get somebody who understands my market, the orientation of my market, my P&L, the strategy of the business, and enough about consumer data to represent it, as Steve was just saying? So I think we need to diversify the people in this industry that we can attract and retain, and we need to evolve the people who are already here to give them skills that maybe they haven't been afforded the opportunity to get because they're running market research projects all day. That's been their job.
Yeah. And that takes leadership, right, within each of the organizations to say we're on this journey to kind of upskill the people and the skills that they bring to the table.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We talked about AI briefly, and I want to just talk a little bit more about how specifically does AI help in this revolution in terms of consumer insights. I know you have a section on prompts. Just if you guys could elaborate a little bit and kind of paint that vision, that would be really helpful.
So we had a work stream in Zappi about 2 years ago, which was AI everywhere, if you remember, and actually we're sort of putting it everywhere. So and everything from helping customer success access information about where we've got norms or capabilities and what offers are available in what spaces, to how you understand them. And then within the product itself, everything from quality control procedures to text analytics to writing reports to, and if you look at the capabilities that are coming through from the recent Google Maths AI, is just going to be a staggering change, I think, for the industry. So I would say everywhere, but then I would, because I spend a lot of time thinking about how we integrate AI into what we do. And I think it's what makes it really exciting, and it makes it exciting for the industry. The other thing, as a technology that's really interesting, I think, if you think about most of the other technologies over the last 20 or 30 years, they've been very, very good for small companies. And so the internet, e-commerce was very good because it allowed, a mom and pop store to sell globally.
Right.
It used to be P&G. What was powerful about P&G is their distribution mechanism. Well, suddenly everyone's got a distribution mechanism as
Already
good as
cracked.
P&G. It's amazing. And then some of the stuff that's happened in manufacturing has suddenly enabled people to, build a new gin brand overnight and be able to create a new. Again, you couldn't do that 40 years ago. The thing about AI that I think is really interesting is actually, I think it will really help large companies, and it will help large companies because they've got data. And that takes me back to that point about managing that data properly. So if we can manage the data, I'm probably going off piste in terms of the answer to your question, but if we can manage that and think about that data, then that's what becomes really powerful, and it's powerful everywhere. I mean, it's what it does everything.
Yeah. I mean, I would say in managing that data, it's also having guardrails in terms of what it provides back, right? Because I always get nervous when somebody prompts data. You could get two different answers depending on how you query the data. And so I would think a lot of the role of when you say take responsibility for the data is to be able to manage those guardrails to ensure that we're not feeding different answers to different audiences within an organization. I don't know how exactly that's done, but I would think that's an important piece.
Very important.
Yeah, I mean that is through prompt engineering. So the way you manage the guardrails of the insight is through prompting the AI. And I wrote a blog post about this about 6 months ago, or maybe a year ago, where I talked about the fact that I think consumer insight people should become prompt engineers.
Got it.
And the reason I think that is because, again, it goes back to what I call expertise. We're very good at asking questions, right?
Yes.
And thinking about the biases behind those questions.
Yes.
And if you think about prompting an AI, it is about thinking about questions and thinking about the bias that question creates. And so we already intrinsically know some of this stuff. And then you've just got to experiment a lot. Because you will come up with stupid answers, and you'll come out with great answers, and you'll come up with things in between. And the only way to find that out is to do it over and over and over again with different prompts, and trying different prompts, and adding and subtracting and all that sort of stuff. And that prompt engineering capability it's in English, right? So we can all do it. It's not like you need to learn Python.
Right. Shout out to you guys for giving some respect to respondents and survey design. There was that's such an important piece to all of this. If we can't get people to answer surveys, we don't have data.
What a novel
we do.
concept. It's almost like we've all forgotten that over the course of the last 15 years, while we've abused, the entire population is willing to give us their opinions.
We might actually treat them with a little
It's
respect.
a very novel concept, Sima. I'm so glad that you mentioned it.
I'm glad you pointed that out in the book. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. Congratulations on the book. It was really enlightening. I enjoyed reading it, and you guys are on a really cool journey.
Sima, it's always good to see you. Thanks for inviting
Pleasure.
us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Amy.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening.